I finish something, I'm super passionate about it. I'm like, all right, everyone read it. I need it to be better. And then if I've used my critiquing the creative technique, you're going to be set up for success. Welcome to Kauffman Writes. This is my daily creative writing live stream. I want to start you off on going simple as possible. Tech, he's going to be an anti-hero in his 30s, was nearly killed as a child when his parents got into trouble with a private company for stealing state-of-the-art technology. And what I'm going to do something interesting here. Weakness, doesn't take care of himself. But I'm going to use one thing as both a strength and a weakness, is manipulative. And I'm going to specifically put this as both a character strength and a character weakness, because you can do that. There's a lot of the times our greatest strengths are our greatest weaknesses. That's going to be the story of how we get to actually explore Tech's story as an anti-hero. It feels like he's like in this really intimate relationship with somebody, but it's actually like a first or second date. And then it flips it on his head because he's the one who's going to get hurt in the very beginning. His cat and his dog. So you see what I've done is I've created a very simple character profile. And now in creating the profile, I've created the outline and the base for a little bit of a story, just in defining and determining his strengths and weaknesses, right? So that's kind of fun. Now, if I was to think about what is the story that I want to tell, the story is going to be about a character who struggles with love and people, decides, goes on a revenge plot to take out the we're just going to call it private company, who, let's say, killed, we'll put killed for now, who killed his parents as a child. There's a story. If you found any value from that technique, please like and or subscribe this video. And that way you'll be alerted when I upload any additional live highlight footage. I try to piece together the live streams after, so that way you can see the most important value from what I'm sharing. Our segment, the technique of the day, critiquing the creative. Whenever you're working, workshopping, or whenever somebody asks you to read their work, this strategy will help you deal with any. Step number 1, tone down the tone. You could be going in with the best of intentions. This is an amazing piece, best thing I've ever read. But if your tone is horrible and you're just pissed off at the world, they're going to pick up on it. I promise you. Start with your tone. If you're intentional with it, it'll make a big difference. Step number 2, expect the unexpected. You want to clarify what their expectations are. You want to ask them, what do they expect of you when it comes down to how you're going to be giving them feedback? Are they expecting you to do a deep dive into structure, character building, world development, grammar, dialogue, and so on and so forth? Or are they just you know what? I just want to know what the vibe is like. I just want to know if you enjoy it and if it was a fun read. 2 completely different asks. And if you go into it with the wrong expectations, then when you deliver feedback on the back end, it's going to create mixed messaging because they're not receiving the value that you're trying to give. It helps get on the same page. Step number 3, reading who? You want to ask them who's their target audience. If they're asking you to read a comedy, but you hate comedy pieces and you're like a horror buff, yes, you can still give great feedback, but it's important to recognize that the feedback or that the story is not intended for you. Step number 4, feelings matter, or do they? Absolutely, feelings matter, 100%. How do they feel about their writing? The type of feedback that you're going to be giving them is going to be completely different than someone who's you know what, this is amazing, best thing I've ever written, this is my masterpiece, as compared to worst thing I've ever written, garbage, a dumpster fire, I don't know what's going on with my life. You're going to be giving 2 different types of feedback based off how they feel about it. Because if you read it and you hear and you see what their sentiment expressed, then you know that they're on the same page and they actually recognize where their problems are at. But what happens sometimes is that when you read through something, because we get so attached to our work and we fall in love with it, when we receive feedback that is unexpected because we feel we're at a certain level, that creates this weird, convoluted, upset feeling. Step number 5, begin the first strike. This is the time for you to start giving the feedback and giving the advice. You now want to keep in mind the first 4 steps. Step 1, where you set your own tone. Step 2, where you asked what their expectations are. Step 3, where you asked who their intended audience is. Step 4, where you asked how they felt about the piece, because all those are important factors when you give the feedback. And if you're keeping these things in mind, then I promise you, you could be giving them the worst feedback in the world. You could be giving them the best feedback in the world. And they're going to be able to more handle it and then talk with you to help improve their piece, because you're coming from it from a self-aware perspective. If you have any questions about this technique, definitely feel free to post them down below. Step number 6, tailor, rinse, and repeat. Just repeating what you did. Sometimes some people want like more of a deep dive, or maybe you've been paid to do something. Or maybe you're trading work with somebody. But if you take the time for each section that you're going to give advice or feedback on, you're going to make your life so much easier. Trust. And then step 7, the real secret. Step 7, ask them to read your work, because we both know that you really want your work read so you can put it out there. Trust me, the number of writers who want their work read, I totally get it. I finish something, I'm super passionate about it. I'm like, all right, everyone read it. I need it to be better. And then if I've used my critiquing the creative technique, you're going to be set up for success. Segment technique of the day. So this is the outline. This is a technique that I love to use whenever I'm working on any type of story, short story, long story, free write, whatever. Step number 1, the thing that I start with is, what is the story? What's the theme? What's the message? What is the tale that you're trying to tell? Write it into 1 sentence. So I'll do this, I'll practice with you. So if I was doing a new story, actually what we were talking about before, let's do a character lost in the jungle has to compete with animals to survive. So once I have my story, step number 2, beginning with an end. I am a huge proponent, huge proponent of building your story around your character. We're going to plot out what is the first thing and what is the last thing that's going to happen to the character in the story. And you always want to make them as extreme stakes as possible. All right, Johnny's going to be our character. Johnny gets shipwrecked out at sea. Never seen that one before, but that's what we're going to go with. Opening moment. Let's go with that. There's so many different names for beats. What is our closing moment? If Johnny gets shipwrecked, and that's going to be the beginning, what would the end story be? The end of the story, the end of Johnny's story. Now, of course, you could take it in so many directions. This comes down to what would be the most extreme thing for Johnny. Either he escapes the island, or he chooses to stay on the island and becomes a hero, savior, or a lone wolf of sorts. I think instead of him escaping, because that's been done so many times before, I think it'll actually be more interesting for him to become king of the jungle. All right, this is Johnny becoming king of the jungle. This will be fun. Johnny wins fight with an evil monster or animal and becomes king of the jungle. Now, the story that we want to tell starts with Johnny getting shipwrecked and ends with him becoming king of the jungle. Step number 3, the plot thickens. What is the middle moment in the story? So if he gets shipwrecked at sea and he becomes king of the jungle, what is like the halfway point in between both of those? Johnny learns the new fighting style of the way of the beast. So now I have the 3 moments in this story. A lot of the times my writing style, I tend to gravitate towards a 3-act structure. There are more structures and styles out there, but that's the general basis for my storytelling. So we have the opening moment, the midpoint, and the closing moment. If you're a new writer just starting out, this is actually a good stopping point for you. Just get started and let's see where your story takes you. Because sometimes you're outlining too much, you can get more into the outline and then you won't actually start writing. I'm going to assume that you've had maybe a little writing experience, so I want to give you what the next step look like. So right now we're going to create what happens between the midpoint and the opening point, which if you're using a 3-act structure, this would technically be the end of Act 1. Johnny nearly gets killed by an animal and must learn to survive in the jungle. So then the moments that will happen in between here is going to be Johnny getting shipwrecked to him trying to survive, him not wanting to deal with the reality of it. And then this is technically going to be end of Act 1. And now what's going to happen between the midpoint and the closing? Johnny learns a new fighting style of the Way of the Beast between him winning a fight with an evil, well, we'll say beast. Now, usually this is around the time of the story where they have to learn from the old world combined with what they've learned in this portion to reach here. Or Johnny befriends the animals who can't protect themselves. Therefore, he now gets his alliance. I'm just going to say this is the end of Act 2. And you see, now we have a story. So a little bit so you guys can see the full thing. And that is my secret outlining method. All right, I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the flip side.